Your debt is no longer the problem, Sophie. I am. The man who said it stood on the other side of my bakery counter while Chicago rain traced silver lines down the windows behind him. I had never met Alexander Kane, but I knew his face. Everyone in the city did. 38. Billionaire investor. Owner of buildings with his name nowhere on them and influence people rarely discussed above a whisper. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my oven, yet there was not a drop of rain on his shoulders. I tightened my fingers around the foreclosure notice I had been reading when he walked in. Bennett Sweets is closed. His gray eyes moved across the empty display case, the flowers still dusting my apron, and the stack of overdue bills beside the register. I am not here for cupcakes. That makes two of us. I stopped making them 3 hours ago. Something almost like amusement touched his expression. Almost. Then he placed a dark folder on the counter. Your father's debt was sold this afternoon. My stomach tightened. I know. Do you know who bought it? I looked at the folder. Apparently someone who enjoys dramatic entrances. Kane Capital. I stared at him. The amount appeared immediately in my mind. $186,000. The number that had followed me through 11 months of sleepless nights. Dad had died believing he could fix whatever financial mistake he had made. Instead, he left me the bakery, a box of old photographs, and a debt secured against the building. So you came to take the shop? No. Then why buy the note? That is what I came to ask you. I blinked. You bought my debt so you could ask me why you bought it. I bought it because something about it is wrong. He opened the folder and turned several pages toward me. I did not touch them. Your father borrowed $186,000 from Lakeshore Commercial Lending 14 months ago. I know that. Do you know where the money went? Business expenses, equipment, taxes. None of those explanations match the records I have. My pulse began to climb. What records? Alexander studied me for a second before answering. Your father attended a Kane Foundation event 6 weeks before the loan was issued. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. My father sold pastries. He did not attend billionaire charity galas. I have a photograph that says otherwise. He slid a picture across the counter. Dad stood beneath a crystal chandelier, wearing the navy suit we buried him in. Behind him was the gold emblem of the Kane Foundation. Beside him stood a man I did not recognize. My throat tightened. When was this taken? 14 months ago. Why was he there? That is what I intend to find out. I looked up sharply. And what does any of this have to do with my debt? Alexander closed the folder. Possibly everything. The refrigerator hummed behind me. Outside, a bus rolled through standing water, sending rain across the curb. My bakery suddenly felt too small for the man standing inside it. What happens now? I asked. Nothing tonight. Nothing. No foreclosure filing. No collection call. No one touches this building. Relief came so quickly it frightened me. I hated that he could give it with a sentence. For how long? Until I understand what happened. And what do you want from me? His gaze settled on mine. Calm. Controlled. Impossible to read. Answers. I do not have any. Then we find them. I pushed the photograph back toward him. Why should I trust you? Alexander left it where it was. You should not. That answer surprised me more than any promise could have. He stepped away from the counter and buttoned his coat. Have an attorney review every document before you agree to anything I offer you. You are planning to offer me something? Tomorrow. He reached the door, then stopped beneath the little brass bell my father had installed when I was 12. One more thing, Sophie. What? He looked back at me. I did not buy your debt to collect it. My fingers tightened around the photograph. Then why did you buy it? His expression lost the faint trace of warmth it had carried moments earlier. Because somebody went to considerable trouble to make sure I never saw it. Alexander returned at 9 the next morning carrying 2 coffees and a contract thick enough to make. My stomach tightened. I had spent half the night staring at the photograph he left behind. Dad at the Kane Foundation gala. Navy suit. Nervous smile. A stranger beside him. Every time I looked at it, I found another reason to believe my father had kept an entire part of his life from me. Alexander placed 1 coffee beside the register. Vanilla latte. I looked at him. How do you know? Your receipt was on the counter yesterday. That is slightly less disturbing than the answer I expected. I am making progress already. I took the cup, but did not thank him yet. What is in the contract? Work. That sounds suspiciously simple. He opened the folder. Bennett Sweets would provide desserts for 3 Kane Foundation events over the next 6 weeks. The first was Friday evening at the Kane Grand Hotel downtown. The payment was enough to cover almost 4 months of bakery expenses. I read the number twice. This is too much. It is the standard event rate plus exclusivity. I sell pastries, Alex. I know what pastries cost. His gray eyes lifted at the sound of his shortened name, but he did not correct me. Then negotiate. That stopped me. You expect me to negotiate with you? I expect you to have an attorney review the contract, change anything unreasonable, and send it back. And if I refuse the entire thing, then you refuse. What happens to the debt? Nothing while I investigate its origin. I searched his face for the trap. So the contract is not payment for saving my shop. No. And working for your foundation does not make me indebted to you personally. No. You sound almost disappointed. I am discovering that answering your questions correctly requires concentration. I nearly smiled. Nearly. Then I reached the clause requiring my personal attendance at all 3 events. Why do I have to be there? Alexander removed another photograph from the folder. This one showed a wider view of the same gala. Dad stood near a banquet table filled with desserts. The stranger beside him was clearer now. Silver at his temples. Expensive tuxedo. Polished smile. His name is Victor Hale, Alexander said. He has advised my foundation for 17 years. And my father knew him? Apparently. You did not know that? No. Something in Alexander's voice changed. Not anger. Something colder. Victor approved several foundation vendor accounts during the same period your father attended that event. 6 weeks later, your father took out the loan. I looked at Dad's face. You think they are connected? I think coincidences become less convincing when they keep arriving together. And bringing me to these events helps how? Some archived records are stored at the hotel. More importantly, people remember faces, conversations, details. You knew your father. You may recognize something I would miss. So, I am not your employee. No. Not your informant. No. And definitely not your property. His gaze held mine for a long second. Definitely not. I closed the contract. My attorney gets this first. Good. She is expensive. That sounds like your problem. I stared at him. The corner of his mouth moved. That was a joke, Sophie. You should warn people before you do that. He picked up his black coffee. Friday, 7 o'clock. If your attorney approves. I can drive myself. I did not offer a car. By Friday evening, I had changed 12 lines in Alexander Kane's contract, argued over 2 payment terms, and made my attorney confirm 3 separate times that nothing connected the work to my debt. Alexander accepted every revision without complaint. That should have made me comfortable. It did not. At 7 o'clock, I walked into the Kane Grand Hotel carrying 2 insulated pastry cases and immediately understood why men like Alexander never needed to announce themselves. The lobby did it for him. Marble floors reflected chandeliers 20 feet overhead. Men in tailored suits lowered their voices when he crossed the room. A hotel manager abandoned his desk to greet him. Alexander acknowledged everyone with the same quiet nod, then walked directly toward me. You came. I signed a contract. Those are not always the same thing. He reached for one pastry case, then stopped. May I? I looked at his hand, then at him. You remembered. I have been told I am capable of learning. I handed him the heavier case. Do not become arrogant. Too late. Inside the ballroom, round tables stretched beneath warm amber lights. I arranged lemon tarts, chocolate ganache cakes, and caramel pastries while Alexander moved through the room greeting donors. I watched people make space for him without being asked. Power looked different up close. It was quieter than I expected. Nobody seemed afraid of what Alexander might do. They seemed afraid of disappointing him. An hour into the event, I saw Victor Hale. He looked exactly like the photograph. Silver hair, navy tuxedo, calm smile. He was speaking with 2 board members when his eyes found me across the ballroom. His smile vanished for half a second. Then he approached. Sophie Bennett. I set down the serving tray. Have we met? No, but I knew your father. My pulse shifted. How? Victor glanced toward Alexander, who was 20 feet away speaking with a donor. Daniel occasionally helped us with vendor questions. My father owned a bakery. He also understood numbers. That was true. Dad had studied accounting before taking over Bennett Sweets from my grandfather, but almost nobody outside our family knew that. Why was he here 14 months ago? Victor's expression remained pleasant. He had concerns about several invoices. What kind of concerns? Nothing that matters now. It matters to me. His gaze dropped briefly to my hands. Did Daniel leave you his blue ledger? Every sound in the ballroom seemed to disappear. I had never mentioned the ledger to Alexander. I had not mentioned it to my attorney. I had told nobody. What blue ledger? I asked. Victor's smile returned too quickly. Perhaps I am remembering incorrectly. You seemed pretty certain. Your father carried notebooks everywhere. No. He carried one blue ledger. How do you know about it? Before Victor answered, Alexander appeared beside us. He did not touch me. He did not step between us. He simply stood there, and Victor's posture changed. Alex. Victor. Alexander's voice was calm. You knew Daniel Bennett kept a ledger? Victor adjusted his cuff. I saw him carrying something blue once or twice. You called it a ledger. Silence. Victor looked at me. Your father was worried near the end. He believed several foundation payments had been improperly categorized. I told him he was mistaken. Was he? I asked. Most people see patterns when they are already looking for trouble. Alexander's expression hardened. That was not an answer. Victor gave a small shrug. The matter was reviewed. By whom? Finance. You supervised finance oversight that year. Another silence. Victor glanced toward the crowded ballroom. This is hardly the place. Then we will discuss it Monday. Alexander's tone left no room for misunderstanding. Victor nodded, but before leaving, he looked directly at me. Sophie, old records can be misleading. If you find that ledger, speak to me before you assume you understand what Daniel wrote. Then he disappeared into the crowd. I waited until he was gone. You heard that? I asked. Every word. He knew. Yes. And he wants the ledger. Yes. Alexander looked toward Victor across the ballroom, then back at me. Do you know where it is? No. It disappeared after Dad died. For the first time that evening, Alexander looked genuinely unsettled. Sophie, until we know why Victor wants it, do not tell him anything else. I folded my arms. That sounded like an order. He caught himself. A slow breath. Will you please not tell Victor anything else until we understand what he wants? Better. Alexander almost smiled, but my attention had already returned to Victor. Across the ballroom, he was no longer speaking to anyone. He was watching me. Victor Hale left the ballroom before dessert service ended, but the feeling of being watched stayed with me all the way home. By Saturday morning, Alexander had sent exactly one message. I would like to arrange security until we understand Victor's interest in you. I read it twice before replying. No? His answer came 30 seconds later. May I ask why? Better, I thought. Because I run a bakery, not a country. I am not having strangers follow me around Chicago. 3 dots appeared. Then, understood. I expected an argument. Instead, Alexander walked into Bennett Suites 40 minutes later carrying black coffee and an expression that suggested accepting my answer had physically inconvenienced him. You are under my protection, he said. I stared at him over a tray of cinnamon rolls. And there it is. There what is? The part where asking politely becomes temporary. He exhaled. Victor knew about the ledger. He knew your father. He knew details I did not. I was standing there. Then you understand why I am concerned. Concern does not give you authority over me. His jaw tightened. I am trying to keep you safe. I set down the tray. Protection without permission is just another kind of control. Silence settled between us. The ovens clicked softly behind me. Alexander looked toward the rain-darkened windows, then back at me. All right. That sounded painful. It was. I almost smiled. Then my phone rang. My attorney had found something in Dad's archived bank statements. For 7 months before his death, he had paid $47 each month to a storage company on the South Side. I had never seen the account. Alexander heard enough of the conversation to understand. Do you want me to come with you? He asked when I hung up. Not I am coming. Not you are not going alone. A question. Yes, I said. But we do this properly. Agreed. 2 hours later, we stood inside the office of Lakeside Storage while the manager verified my estate documents and authorization. Dad had rented Unit 318 for 7 months. The account had been closed 11 days after his death. Who closed it? I asked. The manager studied the archived record. There was a secondary authorized contact. My stomach tightened. Can you tell me who? He turned the printed record toward me. Victor Hale. I stopped breathing for a second. Alexander did not move. Was Mr. Hale authorized to remove property? My attorney asked through the speaker on my phone. The manager checked another page. According to this, Mr. Bennett added him as an authorized contact approximately 3 months before the account was closed. Do you have an inventory of what was removed? I asked. No, we do not inventory customer property. Hope dropped out of me. So whatever Dad kept here is gone. Not necessarily, Alexander said. I looked at him. Victor knew about the blue ledger. He had access to this unit. 11 days after Dad died, the account was closed. What exactly am I supposed to think? That we have facts. Not yet an answer. I stared at him, surprised. You are telling me not to jump to conclusions? Apparently you are a bad influence. The manager handed me copies of the available records. As we stepped outside, cold Chicago wind pushed against my coat. Alexander stayed beside me without touching me. I can have Victor removed from every foundation account within an hour. Do you have proof he did anything wrong? No. Then do not. His eyes narrowed. You are asking me to trust him. No. I am asking you to trust evidence. Alexander looked away toward the gray skyline. I dislike this approach. Because you cannot control the outcome? Because I can control many outcomes. That is exactly the problem. He looked back at me, and something in his expression softened. You really are not afraid of me. Should I be? Most people are careful around me. Most people probably do not charge you $4 for a cinnamon roll. $4.25. I blinked. You remembered? I pay attention. My phone vibrated before I could answer. Unknown number. One message. I opened it. If you want to understand your father's debt, come alone Monday at noon. Beneath the message was an address. Then a second line appeared. Bring the blue ledger. Alexander read my face, but not my screen. What happened? I turned the phone toward him. His expression changed instantly. Victor, I do not know. Another message arrived before either of us spoke. You already know where Daniel hid it. I stared at those words until the Chicago traffic became distant noise. Whoever sent them did not merely believe the ledger still existed. They believed I had it. The message stayed on my screen all weekend, but by Monday morning I had made one decision. I was not going to that address alone, and I was not going there without knowing who had sent it. My attorney forwarded the number to the appropriate investigator, while Alexander had his legal team preserve every message and timestamp. He hated waiting. I could tell by the way he stood beside the bakery window at 11:30, staring at Chicago traffic as if patience were a personal insult. You could sit down, I said. I could, but you will not. Correct. At 11:42, my phone rang. Victor Hale. I answered on speaker. Sophie, I assume you received my message. Alexander's eyes hardened. So it was you. Victor ignored him. I would prefer to speak privately. Then you should not have involved my father's debt. A pause. Daniel misunderstood several financial transactions. That misunderstanding can still be corrected. How? Give me the blue ledger, and I can make the debt disappear. I looked at Alexander. He became perfectly still. That is interesting, I said. Why? Because Alexander owns the debt. Silence. So unless you secretly control Kane Capital, you cannot make anything disappear. Victor's voice cooled. There are arrangements you do not understand. Then explain them. Bring me the ledger. I do not have it. Daniel would never have destroyed it. You seem very certain. Your father was sentimental. Alexander finally spoke. Victor, you are negotiating with an asset you do not control. Victor gave a quiet laugh. That has never stopped you, Alex. Something changed in Alexander's face. Nobody bargains with what is mine. The words came low and immediate. I turned toward him. No. He looked at me. Sophie, the debt is yours. I am not. Silence filled the bakery. Even Victor stopped speaking. I held Alexander's gaze. Do not confuse protecting me with owning me. His jaw tightened, but he did not argue. You are right. Victor laughed again. How touching. We are finished, I said, and ended the call. Alexander looked like he wanted to essay. The number looked different when it was written in my father's hand. $186,000 had been a threat for almost a year. On that page, it became a question. Alexander photographed every written page without removing the ledger from my hands, then called an independent forensic accountant and my attorney. By late afternoon, we were sitting at the small table behind Bennett Suites while the accountant compared Dad's notes with archived foundation records. The first match came at 4:17. A vendor number beside Victor's initials belonged to a consulting company that had received repeated payments from the Kane Foundation. The second match came 12 minutes later. 3 dates in Dad's ledger matched transfers Alexander's internal records showed as approved expenses. What was the consulting company doing for the foundation? I asked. Alexander stared at the report on his laptop. According to these records, financial compliance. I almost laughed. That seems unfortunate. That is one word for it. The accountant warned us that matching numbers were not proof of wrongdoing. More records had to be reviewed. Alexander hated that answer. I could see it in the rigid line of his shoulders. But he said, continue properly. That mattered more than he knew. By 6, my hands were cold and my head hurt. I closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen. We need sugar. Alexander followed me. Is that professional advice? It is bakery law. I took 2 small dark chocolate cakes from the refrigerator. Each had a thin layer of honey caramel and sea salt. Dad called these sweet mercy. Alexander accepted one. Why? My grandmother used to say mercy only mattered when you had enough power not to give it. He looked at me for a second before tasting the cake. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. Well, I asked. Sweet. That is generally the idea. His eyes stayed on mine. I was not talking about the cake. My breath caught, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing it. Careful. Why? Because you have a habit of making ordinary words sound possessive. The faint amusement disappeared from his face. Then tell me where the line is. That surprised me. You are asking? I am learning. Slowly. Painfully. I folded my arms. If sweet means something you decided I am, no. Alexander nodded. And if it is simply what I want to call you? You still ask. He considered that. May I call you sweet? I let the silence stretch just long enough to bother him. Not yet. Instead of arguing, he took another bite of cake. Cruel. You survived. My phone rang before I could smile. The accountant had found another connection. We returned to the table. A company that received foundation payments had used a mailing address linked to an office Victor leased during the same year. More importantly, the total amount Dad marked beside those transactions was not exactly my debt. It was $184,760. With administrative charges added when the loan was created, my obligation had become $186,000. Alexander leaned back slowly. That is too close to ignore. But not proof, I said. His eyes met mine. Not proof. He was learning that phrase too. The accountant continued. Dad had apparently begun tracking the payments weeks before the gala. Then, 4 days after the event, he requested copies of several vendor invoices from the foundation. 6 weeks later, the loan appeared in his name. I stared at the timeline. Dad did not borrow money because the bakery was failing. We do not know that yet. You think he might have been trying to document something. I think your father wanted me to see these numbers. Alexander pointed to Dad's final message. And somebody wanted me never to see the debt connected to them. I looked toward the dark bakery windows. For months, I had been angry with Dad for leaving me trapped beneath a decision I could not understand. Now another possibility was taking shape. Maybe the debt had never been his decision at all. The accountant spoke again. He had located an archived electronic record connected to the original loan application. The submission account belonged to an outside financial services contractor. Its administrative contact was Victor Hale. Alexander went completely silent. I knew that silence now. It was the place where his anger became control. Alex, I said. His gray eyes lifted to mine. Evidence first. He held my gaze for several seconds. Then he nodded. Evidence first, sweet. I raised an eyebrow. For the first time all day, he smiled. Too soon. Very. Then my attorney interrupted us. There was one more document. 3 days before Dad's loan application was submitted, Daniel Bennett had emailed Alexander Kane directly. The message had never reached Alexander's inbox. Its subject line contained only 5 words. Victor Hale is stealing from you. The email changed Alexander more than the ledger did. He read the subject line twice, then sat perfectly still at the little table behind my bakery while the forensic accountant traced how my father's warning had disappeared. The message had entered a foundation screening system before being redirected into an archived folder under an administrative rule created by Victor's office. That still did not prove Victor had personally intercepted it, but the pattern was becoming difficult to explain away. 17 years, Alexander said quietly. Victor has been beside me for 17 years. I watched his hand close around his untouched coffee. Then 17 years deserves facts, not assumptions. His eyes lifted. You keep saying that. Because you keep needing to hear it. By Tuesday afternoon, the independent audit had uncovered 6 questionable vendor accounts. 3 shared addresses with companies connected to Victor. 2 had invoices that could not be verified. The 6th had received payments totaling almost exactly the amount Dad recorded. Alexander's attorneys contacted the Foundation board and appropriate financial authorities. Victor's access to Foundation accounts was suspended pending review. Everything was documented. Everything was legal. Everything was painfully slow. Alexander hated every minute. I could end this conversation with one phone call, he said as we stood in his office overlooking downtown Chicago. Then what? I asked. He loses everything. And Dad gets what? Alexander turned toward me. Justice. No. He gets your anger. The room went quiet. 40 floors below us, headlights moved along the streets like threads of white light. If you destroy Victor because you can, I said, then he still decides what kind of man you become. Alexander looked away. For several seconds, I thought I had pushed too far. Then he asked, what would your father want? My throat tightened. The truth to survive him. Alexander nodded once. Then we do it your way. Not my way. The right way. You really refuse to let me give you credit for anything. You already have enough things. That earned the smallest smile. An hour later, Victor arrived with his attorney after agreeing to meet the Foundation's outside counsel. I stayed because Dad's records were part of the review, but I sat beside my attorney, not Alexander. That distinction mattered to me. Victor looked older than he had at the gala. He denied stealing anything. He claimed the vendors were legitimate contractors and insisted Dad had misunderstood complicated transactions. Then Alexander's attorney placed a copy of Dad's loan application on the table. Did you know Daniel Bennett had this debt? Victor hesitated. I became aware of it. Before or after his death? Another pause. Before. I felt my chest tighten. Why did you offer to make it disappear? I asked. Victor looked at me. Because this situation has become unnecessarily damaging. To whom? He did not answer. The attorney continued through the documents until she reached the storage account. Victor admitted he had been authorized to access Dad's unit. He claimed Dad asked him to retrieve financial papers if anything happened to him. Did you remove the blue ledger? Alexander asked. Victor's eyes moved toward him. No. Did you look for it? Silence. That was the first answer nobody needed translated. Victor's attorney ended the meeting soon afterward. The investigation would continue, but Alexander did not threaten him. He did not raise his voice. He simply instructed counsel to preserve every record and cooperate fully with investigators. After Victor left, Alexander remained beside the conference table. I wanted to make him afraid, he admitted. I know. I wanted him to understand what it costs to betray me. And now, he looked at Dad's ledger lying between us. Now I want to understand what it cost your father to tell the truth. Something inside me softened. Not because Alexander had power. I already knew that. Because for once, he had chosen not to use it simply because he could. My attorney entered again carrying another document recovered from the loan archive. Sophie, you need to see this. She placed it before me. The signature at the bottom looked like Dad's. Almost. But the date beside it was impossible. I knew exactly where my father had been that day. He had been in a hospital room with me, recovering from emergency surgery, unable to sign anything. I looked at Alexander. He understood before I spoke. The debt that had nearly taken my bakery might never have legally belonged to my father at all. The signature was the first thing that finally made the debt feel smaller than the truth. My attorney sent the loan documents to a forensic document examiner that afternoon, while Alexander's legal team requested the original records from Lakeshore Commercial Lending. By Wednesday morning, the preliminary findings were enough to change everything. The signature on the application showed inconsistencies with verified examples of Dad's handwriting. The supporting authorization had been processed through the same outside contractor connected to Victor's administrative network, and the timeline contradicted hospital records my attorney had preserved. None of it was a final legal judgment yet, but Alexander did not wait for a court to decide whether I deserved another peaceful night. He came into Bennett Suites shortly before closing and placed a single document on the counter. What is this? I asked. A release. I looked down. The amount owed was listed as $0. No conditions. No transfer of ownership. No hidden obligation. Alex, Kane Capital owns the note. Kane Capital can release its claim while the underlying conduct is investigated. I read every line twice because 11 months of fear had taught me that freedom usually came with fine print. There was none. What do I owe you? His expression changed. Nothing. You paid for this debt. That was my decision. You could lose the entire amount. That is also my problem. I almost laughed because he had thrown my own logic back at me. Instead, my eyes burned. For months, $186,000 had existed in every room with me. It sat beside my bed at 3 in the morning. It followed me into the bakery before sunrise. It turned every slow Tuesday into panic and every broken appliance into catastrophe. Now it was a zero printed on white paper. Why? I whispered. Alexander rested both hands on the counter, but kept his distance. Because whatever happens with the investigation, I will not use your father's debt as leverage over you. You never asked me for anything. I wanted to. I looked up. What? He was quiet for a moment. Your trust. Your time. The right to know where you were when I was worried. The right to solve problems you had not asked me to solve. His mouth tightened slightly. I am accustomed to believing that wanting something and having the power to secure it are nearly the same thing. They are not. I know that now. The refrigerator hummed behind us. Outside, snow had begun replacing the rain that had followed us all week. Alexander looked at the release between us. Wanting you does not make you mine, Sophie. Something inside my chest went painfully still. That sentence should not have mattered more than the zero on the page. It did. That might be the smartest thing you have said since we met. I was hoping for something more flattering. Do not ruin it. His mouth curved. I turned toward the pastry case and removed the last sweet mercy. I placed it in a small white box and slid it across the counter. For surviving personal growth. Is that a recognized bakery occasion? It is now. He opened the box and looked at the cake. Sweet. I narrowed my eyes. Are you asking about the dessert? I am being extremely careful. I let him suffer for 3 seconds. Better. His smile was quiet this time. No performance. No victory. Just warmth. Then my attorney called. The document examiner had completed an initial comparison. Dad's signature on the loan application was highly inconsistent with his verified signatures, and investigators had requested additional records from the contractor that processed it. Victor's attorney had also contacted the foundation board. Victor was stepping away from every advisory role while the review continued. Alexander listened without interrupting. When the call ended, I expected satisfaction. Instead, he looked tired. 17 years, he said. You trusted him. Yes. That does not make his choices yours. He looked at me for a long moment. You always make things sound simple. They are not simple. They are just still true. I folded the release carefully and slipped it into my bag. For the first time since Dad died, the bakery felt completely mine again. Alexander picked up his cake and headed toward the door. Alex. He stopped. Thank you. He looked back at me. For the debt. I shook my head. For finally understanding the difference between helping someone and owning the outcome. He opened the door, letting cold Chicago air sweep through the bakery. Good night, Sophie. Good night. He stepped outside without asking when he would see me again. And strangely, that was the moment I realized I wanted him to. 3 weeks later, I learned that freedom could sound like a brass bell over a bakery door. It was 10 minutes after noon when Alexander walked into Bennett Sweets and took his place at the end of a line that stretched almost to the entrance. He did not call ahead. He did not ask anyone to clear a table. He simply waited. I watched from behind the counter while customers ordered cinnamon rolls, chocolate cakes, and more sweet mercy desserts than Dad and I had ever sold in a single afternoon. News about the investigation had stayed mostly private, which was exactly how I wanted it. Victor remained away from the Kane Foundation while attorneys, auditors, and investigators worked through years of financial records. My father's loan had been formally disputed, and the evidence surrounding his signature was still being reviewed. There were questions left unanswered, but they no longer owned my mornings. Bennett Sweets was mine. The contract with the foundation had brought new customers. The debt was gone, and Alexander Kane was waiting 15 minutes to buy a $4 pastry. When he finally reached the register, I folded my arms. You know the owner. I have heard she is difficult, terrible woman, unreasonable boundaries, absolutely exhausting. His gray eyes warmed. I like her. I looked down before my smile betrayed me. What can I get you? One sweet mercy. $4.25. He handed me a $5 bill. Keep the change. Showing off again. 75 cents of reckless financial power. I put the cake into a white box. He accepted it, but he did not leave. There is something else, he said. That sounds expensive. Dinner. I looked at him. Dinner is expensive? The way I planned it, probably. There is your first mistake. His expression became almost cautious. I had never imagined Alexander Kane could look cautious. Would you have dinner with me, Sophie? No assumption. No car waiting outside. No schedule already decided for me. Just a question. I let him wait. He deserved at least 5 seconds. Friday. 7:30. 7:30. I choose the restaurant. He nodded. You choose the restaurant. And I drive myself. A faint smile appeared. I suspected that part. Friday evening. I chose a small Italian place 12 blocks from the bakery, the kind with red booths, handwritten specials, and garlic bread that arrived before anyone asked for it. Alexander showed up exactly on time. No entourage. No private room. He even let me order the wine-free sparkling cider without commenting on my taste. We talked for 2 hours. Not about debt. Not about Victor. Not about contracts. He told me his mother used to make terrible pancakes every Sunday and insist they were perfect. I told him Dad once accidentally delivered a wedding cake to the wrong church and spent 40 minutes chasing it across Chicago. Alexander laughed so hard that the couple at the next table stared. I realized I had never heard him laugh like that. Outside afterward, snow drifted beneath the streetlights. We stood beside my car, neither of us rushing to end the evening. Sophie. Yes. He hesitated. May I call you sweet now? I remembered the first time he had used the word. Back then, it had sounded like something he wanted to define for himself. Now it sounded like what it should have been all along. A question. A privilege. Something I could accept or refuse. I reached for his hand. Yes. His fingers closed gently around mine. Good night, sweet. Good night, Alex. He did not ask where this was going. Neither did I. Some things deserve time. Instead of ownership, Dad had tried to warn a powerful man about the truth, and somehow that unfinished act had brought Alexander into my bakery. He saved me from a debt I never should have owed. But that was not why I chose him. I chose him because the man who once believed power meant controlling every outcome learned that love asked for something harder. Patience, respect, permission. He could have claimed almost anything in his world. In the end, he understood that being chosen was worth more.